I'm quite singular in my approach to form. I make this one form based on a Korean form called a moonjar. People ask me if it gets boring, but in a way I think it's quite freeing. You know, you've got one constant, so that means that I got the freedom to play with the surface and the ideas behind the work. I've always quite liked geology, and so I know a little bit about rocks and minerals and things. And also growing up in a place, you know the landscape from your childhood and you know what's where, and so it's nice, you know, you're thinking, oh well, this could be nice and where can I find that, and then you're retreading old paths from childhood and finding old things that you noticed from years ago and things. So I find that nice. A true moon jar is made from porcelain and is always pure white in the Korean tradition. I actually use a grog porcelain. So moon jars are made with two halves which are then joined. So each half is about a bag of clay, so 12.5 kilos. So I wedge the clay and then a big bat on the wheel, and I throw down the big lump of porcelain, and then I beat it roughly into centre just by slapping it with my hands, just to minimise the amount of work involved in centering that amount of clay. I find with centering, particularly with large work, that it's almost quite interesting. You've got to be centred yourself and quite calm, otherwise it can turn into quite a battle. But if you're in the right space, then it's pretty straightforward if you've done the beating well. You're going down into the clay and opening out. So with a big lump of clay, you've got to use quite a lot of both hands almost, and pulling out. And then compressing the base is very important. Then I'm pushing the clay back in, both hands, working it up into a cone, and then I kind of dig under at the base, and I do this thing where I use my left hand, and I use the whole palm of my hand to pull up, do initial pull, maybe even 2 pulls like that. I just find getting that weight of clay up, it really helps to get it moving upward before I go for a proper pull with my knuckle, which is the next thing. And I keep the form very vertical right until quite near the end. Then I widen the shape out in a controlled way to exactly the shape that I want. I don't think about the dimensions too much when I'm throwing the first half, but once I've finished it, I then measure it, and then I move on to the next piece. Repeat the process, and then as I'm finishing the form then, on the second piece, I'm measuring quite regularly to make sure that I get to the previous measurement exactly. And then when they're sort of leather hard, I then bring the 2 halves out again, and although I normally have an idea which is going to be the top and bottom, I'm never entirely certain. So I then make a sort of visual decision on which is going to be base and top. Then I put each half on the wheel head, and I'm scoring, cross-hatching. So I score one way, and then I score the other, and then adding slip, lift that half off, put the other half on the wheel. Same again, scoring and slip. Then I'm ready then to join one half on top of the other. So when I'm throwing the halves, I don't wire them off, because then I'm able to flip one bowl over completely upside down, and because it hasn't been wired, it sticks to the bat. So I flip the one bowl on top of the other, and just place them down carefully on top of each other, and they should line up perfectly. And then, I give them a little tap like a drum, just to, when you do a join, it's quite important to sort of agitate the join a bit to get it to really join. And then I tend to leave it for 20 minutes, half an hour or so, to let the slip and things join in a bit. Wire off the top board, and then I work the join then with a little wooden tool, like pressing it together kind of one way and then the other. With a pin you cut the base out of the top bowl basically to make a hole in the what's now the top of the pot. Then you're working the join from the inside and from the outside, and then dry I work the join with a kidney and fingers on the inside, and once I feel like the join's well and truly worked enough to one to hide it and one to make sure that it's well and truly secure, then I start on rethrowing the rim. So I add water and I rework the rim, and I do work the join a bit wet as well to really finish the form, and then I'm throwing probably the top third of the pot, rethrowing it into a nice rim for the moon jar form. In a few days' time, when it's much drier, I will then flip it over into a chuck to turn the base, and I actually use a car tyre as a chuck, and then turning the foot ring really quite narrow, because one of the most important aspects of a moon jar is the ratio between rim diameter and foot ring diameter. The foot ring needs to be smaller than the rim. I really do enjoy playing with the glazes and the surfaces and the materials, and being out in nature and finding different materials and adding them into the work. And that's done not just for the aesthetic value, but it's a connection to the land and to the landscape which inspires me.